Good morning. Happy Easter to you guys. Thanks for being here at Brownwood Community Church with us to celebrate Easter, like the reason we exist as followers of Jesus, right? So I'm so glad that you chose to give us some of your time. And not everybody, but a lot of people go to church on Easter, and I'm glad that you chose us this time. So thank you for being here. I hope you're not disappointed so far. Because I might let you down. You know, the worship is great, but the preaching is suspect at best. No, I'm kidding. Hopefully I'm kidding. But anyway, so glad that you're here to be with us because, again, Easter, it represents the foundation of our faith. It's all about Jesus, right? It should be. Like, I didn't get a good response from y'all on that. Like, do y'all know what Christianity's about? Like, are you all lost people? Unchurched people, we exist for you if you are, so no condemnation. We're glad you're here, but it's all about Jesus. Come on, somebody. I know y'all don't amen, but do something, right? It's all about Jesus and what happened on Easter Sunday when he rose from the dead, and it's amazing and it's big and it's huge. And then today, if you're here and you're not real sure about all of that, let me just tell you this way, okay? We're talking about Jesus, and there is no Christianity if there is no Jesus, right? Y'all get that? I mean, I hope you understand that. And so today I want to dive into that a little bit because today being Easter Sunday, where we particularly celebrate his resurrection, every Sunday we should be celebrating his resurrection because, again, without all of that, there is no Christianity. We have no faith. But what happened on Easter Sunday is that Jesus' resurrection, what it did is it punctuated and authenticated everything he taught, including what he taught about himself. We just spent 6 weeks talking about Jesus' identity. Who did he think he was? Like, you ever been asked that? Who do you think you are? When they ask Jesus, who do you think you are? It's like, oh, well, let me tell you who I am. And it's who he thought he was that got him killed. It wasn't the miracles, and it wasn't the compassion that he showed, and the mercy that he showed, and all those things were incredible, and the religious people didn't like that, but it was who he claimed to be that got him crucified, because it just couldn't be in their system of belief and in their religion that God would actually come and do what Tim just talked about, Jesus coming to do and rescuing us from our own sin and death and so forth. And so today, if you're here and, you're in church, you're in worship with the church, so I'm glad you've got that start. But you might be one of those people who's kind of maybe on your way out of the church completely. Maybe you're kind of pushing away from faith in general, and you've got some questions and you've had some issues with this talk about Jesus and who he is. And maybe you're just got all these questions and doubts and you're on your way out the door, or maybe you're just at that point of beginning where you just don't know. And so maybe today we could talk about this question: is Jesus real? And maybe we could say, is Jesus for real? Because again, starting where we started about our whole faith system being built on the person of Jesus and his resurrection, because I mean, if you want to get to the bottom of it, and if you're willing and brave enough to ask the question, right? Is he real? I mean, can I really put my faith in this belief about this person, Jesus? Is Jesus real? And there's all kinds of reasons to question that, right? You can admit it. It's crazy. I mean, he was born of virgin birth, worked all these miracles, did all this stuff, and then he was crucified, and he came back. Come on, man, that's crazy. It sounds crazy, but it's what we stake our claim on. Like, we don't exist if we don't believe that. And maybe let's get specific about why some people question the Christian faith. It's only one reason. It's not the only reason. It's only one reason of many. You ever heard anybody question our faith like this? Like, how can Jesus be real if his so-called followers are nothing like what they say he is? Because to be a follower of Jesus, a rabbi, you have to be like him. You have to take on not just his teachings in the sense up here, but take on his lifestyle, his way of life. And so many people from the outside look at the church and look at people who are so-called followers of Jesus and they go, yeah, that ain't it. And so if the people who claim to follow Jesus are fake in a sense, then maybe he is too. Maybe it's not real. Maybe Jesus is not real. Because we're not lacking any examples of this, are we? I mean, throughout Christian history, throughout world history, we've seen Christians and we've seen, evil creep into the church, and the love of money and the love of power creep into the church and take over the church just like it does the rest of the world and the world systems, right? I mean, sometimes you can't tell the difference. So we've got plenty of examples, even just recently. Once again, a well-known pastor of a brand name megachurch shows to be corrupt, or at least partially corrupt to the point of, being out of ministry and having to step down. And it makes me go, dang it. Because who we are and how we represent Jesus is pretty important. I mean, if it's really life and death like we talk about in the church, I mean, why can't we show up a little better sometimes, Now, maybe for you, it wasn't so public, like it wasn't this big public thing or newsworthy thing that caused you to start maybe walking away from faith or walking away from the church. Maybe it was more personal. Maybe it was behind the scenes. Maybe it was your pastor who failed you, who did something horrible, or who was two-faced, or who just judged you or shunned you. Or maybe it was when you were a teenager. Maybe it was your youth pastor. How many teenagers' faith has been screwed up by a bad youth pastor? Can we get real this morning? And at that vulnerable time in a person's life when they're a teenager and they're really questioning it anyway, and the person who's supposed to represent that faith lets them down by running off with one of the youth when they're married or something like that. I don't know your story, but maybe it's not even anybody to do with ministry. Maybe it's your family. Maybe your parents claim to be Christians. Maybe in public, they put on a good face and they looked the part, but when you went home at night, you saw the real picture of who they really were behind closed doors, and it made you go, I don't think I want any part of that faith. Or maybe it was just, maybe it was a spouse or a loved one, someone else who was really close to you that claimed to be a follower of Jesus, but fell so short that it made you question the whole thing. And here's the thing. I mean, I get it. I understand where that's coming from. And I understand that it's hard to believe in something that people are supposed to represent, that they always fall so short. But before you judge Jesus too harshly, then consider this. Jesus died for us because we fall short. If you didn't know that, you came just to hear that today. That the reason Jesus died is because we fall short. Yet, still, he gets judged as fake because we fall short. When I think about that, I'm like, wait, really? Why do we judge Jesus that way? Now, I don't know about you, but check this out. I don't like to be judged by somebody else's behavior. I don't like to be judged anyway, but you know what I'm saying? I don't like to be, let me use a nicer word. I don't like to be evaluated by someone else's behavior. That whole guilty by association kind of thing. Let me just tell you, I grew up with that a lot because I come from a family with 7 children. You're like, oh, dang. And I was the youngest. I know it gets worse. And let me tell you, when you got 7 children in your house, you got some bad behavior going on. And like good parents do, you look around and you know something bad happened, but you don't have a clue which one of the 7 did it. And it was never me. I don't see any of my siblings here today. But I'm telling you, I was the good kid. You know, I used to say I was the black sheep of the family, and somebody looked at me one time and said, Scotty, you're the only white sheep, dude. Right? I was never the one. But my parents, it was like they just didn't have the energy, I guess, to try and figure out who was the culprit. So they just punished all 7 of us. I hated that. I didn't like getting judged or getting punished for someone else's bad behavior. But isn't that what happens to Jesus? When we're talking about faith in this sense, when people look at the church and look at Christians who say they follow Jesus and they go, but look how hypocritical they are. Y'all never heard that, have you? You ever been called a hypocrite because you fell short one time? Yeah. It's like we judge Jesus, we judge the whole faith system based off the behavior of those who claim to follow Jesus. So let me just ask you today, even if just for today, especially if you're a person who's questioning faith altogether, what if we judge Jesus only by his own merit? I mean, that's what we prefer for ourselves, isn't it? Like we want to be judged. Like, it's okay. Like, if you want to evaluate me, if you want to have a conversation about our relationship and how it's going and how I'm doing in that, like, if you want to talk to me about that, don't talk to me about my kids' behavior, because they're unpredictable sometimes. If you hadn't noticed, any kids. Well, my kids aren't really kids anymore, though. I can't use that example anymore. But right? And like, if you're going to talk to me, evaluate me, at least evaluate me based on me. Let's just do, like today, for Jesus, let's take him at his own merit. And maybe we can see something more clearly about what this is all really supposed to be about. And here's the thing. If you want to talk about the merit of Jesus, you have to start with love. And now you're going, where is this going? I didn't see that coming. But like for me, when I actually study Jesus, that'd be a good exercise, wouldn't it? If you're going to follow him, you probably want to know him as best you can. I mean, if you want to talk about him, to me, it comes down to what is the merit, the value, the quality of Jesus that stands out to me when I actually read the Gospels, which tell his life story. To me, it comes down to this. You have to start with love, because he did what he taught about love and how he embodied the sense of God's love and how he demonstrated for us what it looked like, what God was like. He even talked about that. Like, if you want to know what God is like, just look at me, watch me, watch me, watch me. You'll see what God is like. And it was all about how much God loved us. So what we're going to take a look at to start off with is part of the Gospel of John. Because John, when he writes his gospel, he felt so loved by Jesus, he talked about himself as if he's God's special, chosen, extra loved person, right? He talks about himself as the one Jesus loved, as if Jesus didn't love the others. Okay, so when remember, this is an eyewitness follower of Jesus, like one of the closest 3 followers of Jesus, this dude John, probably the youngest of the 12, most scholars believe. Like, this is going to freak you out. Teenager. Like, did you know that? Like, you see the pictures of, the disciples, and you see these old hairy guys and all that. Like, they were young. They were wet behind the ears, as we like to say. And Jesus trusted his whole enterprise to them. Isn't it miraculous that we made it? Because, young men, we just messed up. Yeah. So John tells us a lot about Jesus and his ability to love. And so we're going to jump into his gospel to get started this morning. It's getting to the climax. If you read the Gospel of John, it's like the first half of the whole gospel is, the first 2.5 years or whatever. And like the whole last half or so of his gospel actually is all within this 2-week time frame. I'm looking at my Bible scholar. He's nodding at me. I'm right here. And it's like John on purpose, he slows down time. Because when you're looking back on the story of the life of Jesus, what you see is that he is going to leave. He's going to die, he's going to resurrect, and then he's going to ascend back to the Father. So he's leaving us. He's leaving them. And so you've got a band of, 12 young men and a few women and others that you're going to leave your whole mission in their hands. And you know the time is coming. You're getting to your end and you're leaving it with them. What are you going to talk about and what are you going to do? What's most important, right? What's foundational? Well, look at how John starts this off in chapter 13, verse 1. He says, it was just before the Passover, okay? Jesus, look at what he says. He makes this clear. Jesus knew. Look at your neighbor and say, he knew. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. That's important. He knew exactly what was coming, and he was getting ready and getting them ready for what was about to happen. And John says this. He makes it so personal sometimes. I think he must have really knew Jesus. He says, having loved his own, he's talking about his disciples here, who were in the world. Look what he says. He loved them to the end. John is getting ready to tell us what Jesus emphasized before he left. And he's just kind of introing it, and he says, and I just want to say that he loved us through to the very end. That's the one thing that stood out to John, even as he's remembering and writing this story down. I can only hope that something like this would be said about me when I'm gone. And that's exactly what John said about Jesus. So look here, a few verses later. He's now quoting Jesus. Jesus is in his farewell discourse, as we call it, in the last part of the Gospel of John. And he's quoting something Jesus taught them. Jesus says, a new command I give you. And if you've been around religion like these guys had, you're thinking, no, not another one. Right? Please don't give me another rule to follow. Jesus says, a new command I give you. Love one another. And they thought, that's not new. They've heard that part before, but then Jesus wasn't through. He says, as I have loved you. Oh, dang. He got a little more specific. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. And isn't that where we get it wrong? And isn't that where the church continues over and over and over? We keep seeing it in the news, but it's not just in the news. It's in our world. It's up close and personal. The church and people who follow Jesus continue to get this part wrong. So if you're here this morning, and maybe to use a common term in today's world, maybe you're deconstructing your faith. If you're a young adult, you've probably heard that term thrown out. Maybe you've even considered deconstructing your faith. And what I mean by deconstructing is taking this whole system of belief that we've been taught or somehow we've gained on our own ability to study and learn and so forth throughout our years of calling ourselves a Christian. And we've begun to take it apart piece by piece so that we can get to the bottom of it and hopefully get to the bottom and see, what is this really about? I mean, is there anything to it, or should I just walk away from it? That's what it means to deconstruct your faith. And maybe, like we talked about in the beginning, maybe you're deconstructing it because you're just tired of the bad behavior of Christians, those who claim to follow Jesus, and you can't reconcile like this belief about a Savior who loves so well and the people who claim to follow him that fall so short over and over and over. And look at what Jesus said next. By this, the way you love one another as I have loved you. Jesus said, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. So if that's you, if you've been walking away or deconstructing, as we said, because of the falling short of Christians, you're on good ground. You know why? Because Jesus predicted. Now, this is the positive side of it, that people could be convinced that they're followers of Jesus by the way they behave if they love well, if they love as Jesus has loved us, right? And so if you're questioning it and pushing away and going, I don't know, based off the bad behavior, the failure to love, to get specific, you're on good ground. You've got reason to question. Jesus was saying that the distinguishing characteristic that would show people who he is through us would be the way that we love, because he knew that the way we should love and we were going to be empowered to love by faith in him would be something supernatural that the world wouldn't see anywhere else but in the followers of Jesus. You ever thought about that? Like, what makes the church unique should make us stand out in his own. It's like if you've got a Bible that's got red letters when Jesus is talking, it being red. He's saying, come on. This is how the world's going to know that you follow me. It's by loving each other in this supernatural love that I know you can't do on your own. So you might be thinking, okay, well, what did the love of Jesus look like? Because that's what they're thinking, right? He's like a new commandment, love one another, but not just any love, not like just the law talks about, but love each other the way I loved you. Okay, well, how did Jesus love? Well, it's a good thing to ask. Jesus actually described it himself. Maybe you remember this verse. Jesus says this, and he's talking about himself, obviously. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Now, he taught this before he did it. Can you imagine those guys, those that were there with him when he taught it, and when they saw it, they went, oh. And you start connecting dots because Jesus is teaching these two things together. Yeah, I want you to love the way I loved you. And he could have said, the way I'm going to love you by laying my life down for you. And they started thinking differently, going, oh, that kind of love. That love took over. And that's the good news, that in spite of the failures of his followers, even at that time, which they did often just like we do, that love that Jesus put on display at the cross, it had some results. It has some results. Later, the same author, John, in his epistle, 1 John 4, says it this way. He says, we love, he's talking about those of us who follow Jesus, right? He says, we love not because we're good, not because we got out all the, well, we love because he first loved us. He's saying that's the response that we should see when a person is loved by Jesus the way Jesus himself can love, that the response should be to love. And you, again, might be thinking, well, Scotty, based on what I see and what I've observed, it didn't work. Sometimes I have that thought. Even if I'm looking in the mirror going, Jesus, I don't know if it took the first time. Maybe I need to redo this or something. I don't know. Ever feel that way or ever see that looking around yourself? It's like, I don't know if this is going well. I mean, it's hard to believe in this kind of love and a person who's supposed to embody that kind of love when you see so little of it. And again, there's still evidence, though. There's evidence that it worked. There's evidence that it took, historically speaking. I mean, there's lots of stories, but let me use one that's based in our scripture so that I can stay consistent with that. There is this guy that I love to talk about. Does anybody know? It's the Apostle Paul. I'm sorry, I can't help it. We're talking about Jesus, but Paul, I think of this dude, Saul of Tarsus, as he shows up in the book of Acts. young, passionate follower of the Torah, of the law, a Pharisee like those guys that Jesus was constantly confronting and running up against, the legalists. Paul was one of those. And he hated Christians before they were called Christians. He despised them. He saw them as a cancer to his faith system. And he set out, he made it a personal mission to get rid of the followers of Jesus. And he's thinking, there's not that many yet. If I can just get rid of them, if I can just put enough of them in prison, if I can just scare enough of them, maybe even kill a few of them if necessary, I'll do whatever it takes to get rid of this knockoff Jewish sect that say they follow a guy who was killed on a Roman cross. I gotta get rid of these people. That's Paul. And you may or may not know the story. One day, he's on his way to a place called Damascus to do just that, to get rid of them. And he's got the permission of the people that matter. And he encountered love embodied in the person of Jesus. The glorified Jesus. And that guy who was trying to get rid of it all, who thought Jesus was nothing but a wannabe, wrote this little passage that we all know so well about love. How many weddings have you heard this read in? This same guy wrote, love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. What, this the same Paul, the same Saul, who was so arrogant as to think he had it all figured out? The same guy. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. Look at this one. It is not easily angered. Really? It keeps no record of wrongs. Isn't that powerful? Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. And wouldn't it be great if we could see this kind of love on display more often? We fall short. We fall short and we look around and we see everybody else falling short of that description of love that's so beautiful, so poetic, and so desirable. It's what we all want to see. It's what we all want to experience in our world. And Paul understood, see, Paul, after writing this, he understood that, yes, this is the ideal picture of the love we long to see on display, but he knew that we wouldn't see it completely. And so that's why he wrote this a few verses later. He says, for now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. And you got to remember, their mirrors weren't like our mirrors. They weren't crystal clear. You didn't get a good image of yourself no matter how gussied up you got, right? You know, the piece of bronze or something that they tried to see themselves, but it was a little distorted and bent and discolored. And so Paul's saying, when you look out and you want to see this picture of love, and you look out on the world and you see what's actually reality that we're confronted with on a daily basis, I want you to know that we only see a reflection as in a mirror. But then, Paul starts preaching. But then in the future, what we're going to see, what we're going to experience, we hold on to the hope that, yes, then we shall see it face to face. You think he's talking about a person, not just a characteristic. Because Jesus was the embodiment of that description that Paul just gave of love. He says, now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. He understood that God's love in the world was in process and not yet fully realized, not yet fully recognized in the people of God, most importantly. He knew that we would constantly fall short, even as he talked about himself in other letters that he wrote, how he constantly would fall short. But, there's a big but, grammatically speaking, right? What Paul understood, and that we need to understand, that yes, Jesus was God's full expression of his love for us. That it's perfected not yet in us, but in him. And that he is the picture of where we are to go, right, in the future. And that we're consistently going to be working that out. That Jesus was like a peek into the future of what we have to look forward to because of what God is continuing to do in the world. It looks like God's not doing anything anymore, but he's still at work. We're still going somewhere. We're still becoming something better than what we see now. Isn't that a reason to get excited? I mean, yeah, I wish we were there too. Are we there yet? No, we ain't. We got a little ways to go. But don't lose hope. And most importantly, what we're talking about today, don't give up on Jesus because I mess up. Right? And so, Paul's one example. But then there's me. Like for me and how I do this thing, then there's me and what happened to me. Because as a boy, I was in a helpless, hopeless state. I was a really hard life, super poor, uneducated, not much to look forward to. A failure in school, a failure at pretty much everything. And then as a teenager, I just became, a more grown-up version of the kid version of me, dreaming of something better, wishing upon a star that I could have something better, but thinking if it just means trying harder or doing better, I don't know that I'm ever going to get there. I won't make it. If it's just about education and getting a better education and all that, I don't know if I have what it takes to get there. I don't know if I have any hope. And then, just a couple of weeks before my 16th birthday, just like Paul, I encountered, not religion. I didn't give a crap about religion. I encountered love as a person, the person of Jesus. And so, what Jesus has done in me, by his love, can never, ever, ever be taken from me. And I don't know if you have that story yet, but you could. And yes, I could build a case against Jesus based off the treatment of Christians towards me. Like friendly fire messes up a lot of Christians. The book of James talks about that a little bit. Yeah. And some people could even build a case against Jesus by my behavior. Oh no, preacher, don't blush, right? But what Jesus has done in me by his love, it can never, ever, ever be taken from me. I can't be convinced otherwise. There's too much of a difference. There's too much change. There's too much improvement. There's too much good. Yes, it's still been hard at times, but man, I would never, ever, ever go back to the way that things were. So if you've deconstructed your faith or you've walked away from your faith or Christianity or the church or however you would word it, I just want you to know that I've been there. And even as a Christian, I've Maybe not the same way or to the same extent I've deconstructed. You know why? Because I got in ministry and there's a lot I didn't like about what I saw. Because I actually began to really dive into, especially Jesus in the Gospels, and see what God looks like in the flesh. And a lot of what I was seeing in ministry didn't measure up to that. It was incongruent. They couldn't be the same. So I found a lot I needed to let go of and throw out. And I have. And you know what? You know who I've offended the most? Christians. I've watched really good people, well-meaning people walk away from me, walk away from this church. Why? Because I refuse to put religion in the place of love. And it's messy. But it is the heart and the foundation of what we call the gospel. So if that's you, if that's your story, if that's what you're doing, at the end of deconstructing the Christian faith, you should be left with Jesus. Because if you're digging down to the bottom of what this is all about, you should find him at the bottom. If that's not what you find, then walk away from it, because that ain't it. And when you walk away from that, go looking for Jesus. And if you go seeking him out and you go looking for him, I promise you, he'll find you. You won't have to find him. If that's not where you landed, is with Jesus, then hey, I want you to look for him. Get rid of whatever that is that you've been using or being led by. Get rid of that and go find Jesus. So back to our question, right? Is Jesus real? And I'm not making light of the question. Like, that might sincerely be your question. Is Jesus real? You know, for me, again, Jesus is the only explanation which makes sense of the love that I have experienced. Like Paul. Paul, the man who was out to get Christians, who in the end gave his life for the faith and following Jesus that he was trying to get rid of. Paul gave his life for that. Others did too. Peter, same thing. Only this incredible love that Jesus spoke of and demonstrated could make that kind of change for good happen in a person's life that drastically, where they can do those incredible things like laying down their lives in the same way that he did. You would think they actually listened to what Jesus taught about what love looks like, right? Greater love has no man in this than to lay down one's life for one's friends. So if you're on the way out from Christianity, will you reconsider faith with Jesus, God's love fully expressed as the foundation? Like, whatever it is that you've had before, just get rid of it. Just throw it away, walk away from it. Reconsider faith with Jesus, who is the embodiment of God's love, this incredible, miraculous love. Put him at the foundation and start there and start over. Because then you'll find the life that he promised